Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're sliding between silk sheets in ancient palaces where power and passion intertwined in ways that would make modern scandals look like Sunday school picnics. You're about to meet queens who understood that sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't a sword, it's a strategically dropped shoulder strap. Fair warning, by the time we're done, you'll probably never look at your history textbook the same way again, and you might start side-eyeing every painting of a royal woman, wondering what really went on behind those palace doors. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing whether you're procrastinating at work in Tokyo or actually trying to fall asleep in Toronto. All right, let's begin the story. You find yourself in Alexandria, 48 BCE, where the Mediterranean heat makes even breathing feel like work. The harbor smells of salt and rotting fish. But somewhere above it all, expensive Arabian incense burns in the royal palace. You're watching as a rolled carpet gets carried up marble steps. Nothing unusual, except this particular carpet contains the future of an empire. When it unrolls at Julius Caesar's feet, out tumbles Cleopatra VII, probably the only woman in history who turned herself into a delivery package and still managed to look regal doing it. Now, before you picture Elizabeth Taylor, let's get real. Cleopatra wasn't necessarily the stunning beauty Hollywood sold you. Ancient coins show a woman with a pronounced nose and a chin that could cut glass, but what she lacked in conventional beauty, she made up for with something far more dangerous: a brain that could speak 9 languages and a voice that supposedly sounded like a lyre. Plutarch claimed her real weapon was her conversation. Imagine being so charming that people literally forgot what you looked like. You watch as she works her magic on Caesar, a man who'd conquered Gaul, but apparently couldn't conquer his weakness for smart women who quoted Homer in bed. She didn't just seduce him with her body, she seduced him with midnight boat rides down the Nile, showing him temples older than Rome itself, whispering about gods and glory, while her servants fanned them with ostrich feathers. Historians still argue whether she truly loved him or just recognized a useful ally when she saw one, probably both, because Cleopatra understood that the best lies contain kernels of truth. The mainstream history books tell you she needed Caesar's military support to secure her throne against her brother husband, Ptolemy XIV. Yes, the Egyptians really loved keeping it in the family. But here's the juicy detail they usually skip. She probably introduced Caesar to a special Blue Lotus wine that had, shall we say, performance-enhancing properties. The Romans later called it Egyptian Viagra. Though technically it was more like ancient ecstasy, nothing says strategic alliance quite like drugging your lover with aphrodisiacs blessed by the goddess Isis. When Caesar gets himself murdered, occupational hazard of being a Roman dictator, you'd think Cleopatra would panic. Instead, she pivots faster than a TikTok influencer changing trends. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's lieutenant, who makes the fatal mistake of summoning her to Tarsus to answer for her allegiances. She shows up in a golden barge, dressed as Aphrodite herself, surrounded by servants costumed as cupids and sea nymphs. The entire ship supposedly smelled like perfume for miles. Subtle? No. Effective? Absolutely. You're there when she invites Antony aboard for dinner, and the man who'd fought beside Caesar, who'd seen the worst of human nature in countless battles, turns into putty. She doesn't just feed him, she stages an entire performance where every dish tells a story. Every wine comes with a legend. Every gesture calculated to make him feel like a god. By morning, the interrogator has become the interrogated, and Antony's practically begging to follow her back to Egypt. The power dynamic between Cleopatra and Antony becomes your new obsession as you drift northward through time, landing in 18th century St. Petersburg, where another woman perfected the art of strategic seduction. You're in the Winter Palace now, where Catherine the Great holds court, and the gossip flowing through these gilded halls could fuel 1,000 Netflix series. The servants whisper about her favorites, a delicate term for the parade of lovers who warm her bed and, more importantly, help her govern an empire that stretches across 11 time zones. You notice how she operates differently from Cleopatra, where the Egyptian queen used seduction as a desperate gambit for survival. Catherine wields it like a bureaucratic tool. She's already on the throne, secure in her power after that messy business with her husband Peter III, found dead under mysterious circumstances. Probably shouldn't have insulted her in public quite so often. Now, she collects lovers the way the other monarchs collect art, each one serving a specific purpose in her grand design. For Russia, take Grigory Orlov, the guards officer who helped her seize power. You watch him stride through the palace like he owns it, which in a way he does. Catherine gifted him estates worth millions of rubles. But here's what the pearl-clutching historians don't emphasize. She didn't just pay for sex. She was building a new type of governance, where her bedroom became an unofficial cabinet meeting. Orlov handles military affairs, both in and out of bed, while she dictates letters to Voltaire between romantic encounters, casually reshaping European intellectual thought while still flushed from lovemaking. The mainstream version tells you she had around 12 official favorites over her reign. The spicier chronicles suggest the number was closer to 22, not counting the occasional palace guard who caught her eye during a particularly boring state dinner. But you're starting to see the genius in her system. Each favorite represents a different faction at court, a different expertise she needs. When she takes young Platon Zubov as a lover at age 60, he's 22 and prettier than most of her ladies-in-waiting. It's not just about recapturing youth. He speaks multiple languages and understands European politics. She's basically conducting job interviews in her boudoir. You follow her daily routine, fascinated by the efficiency of it all. She wakes at 6, works on state papers until 8, receives her current favorite for morning conferences until 10, then moves on to official court business. The favorites get their own apartments, connected to hers by a private staircase, architecture designed for discretion and convenience. Historians still argue whether she truly enjoyed the sex or just tolerated it for political gain. But you've seen her private letters. The woman who wrote to Potemkin about missing his delicious kisses wasn't faking everything. Here's a detail that would make modern HR departments faint. She had a trusted lady in waiting whose job included medically examining potential lovers for sexually transmitted diseases. Dr. Rogerson, her Scottish physician, would conduct the inspections under the guise of general health checks. Catherine might have been passionate, but she wasn't stupid. Syphilis had killed more royals than revolutions. She also allegedly tested new favorites with her lady-in-waiting, Countess Bruce, first. Though that might just be salacious gossip, then again, in a court where people wore miniature portraits of the Empress's lovers as fashion accessories, anything was possible. The transformation of Russia during her reign can't be separated from her bedroom politics. While she's breaking in a new favorite, she's also breaking ground on the Hermitage, importing European art and ideas faster than her lovers can keep up. You realize that she's using sex the way modern CEOs use golf. It's where the real deals get made. That gorgeous young Alexander Lanskoy, he helps her plan educational reforms while she teaches him things definitely not in any curriculum. The dashing Sergei Saltykov, he possibly fathers the future emperor Paul I, giving her the air she needs while her official husband plays with toy soldiers. But the real scandal, the one that makes you nearly choke on your imaginary champagne, involves the horse. No, not that rumor, completely fabricated by her enemies, probably the French. The actual shock is how she turned retirement packages for ex-lovers into a formal system. They'd receive titles, estates, art collections, and sometimes even help choosing their replacements. Imagine your ex not just staying friends, but actively helping you swipe right on your next relationship while living in a mansion you bought them. You're still processing Catherine's corporate approach to carnal politics when the scene shifts dramatically backward to ancient Rome, circa 47 CE, where subtlety goes to die. The Empress Valeria Messalina makes every other scandalous queen look like they're running for PTA president. You're in a Roman brothel, not the cheap ones near the Subura, where common soldiers spend their wages, but an upscale establishment where senators' wives go shopping while their slaves wait outside. And there, working under the professional name Lysiska, the she-wolf, is the wife of Emperor Claudius, charging clients for the privilege of bedding royalty. The situation is so absurd, you have to blink twice to believe it. Here's the most powerful woman in the empire, who could have any man executed with a nod, competing with professional prostitutes to see who can service more clients in a single night. Pliny the Elder, not exactly known for his feminist takes, claims she won, exhausting 25 men in 24 hours while her competitor tapped out. The prostitutes supposedly refused to compete with her again, not from moral outrage, but from sheer exhaustion. Imagine being so aggressively horny that actual sex workers file workplace complaints. You follow her back to the palace as dawn breaks, watching her slip into bed beside the snoring Claudius, who's either the most oblivious husband in history or playing a longer game than anyone suspects. The mainstream historians paint him as a doddering fool. But consider this. Maybe he knew exactly what his young wife was doing and calculated that her nocturnal adventures kept her too busy to plot against him. After all, a sexually satisfied Messalina was probably less likely to poison his wine. though given Roman marriage customs, that's definitely grading on a curve. The palace slaves share wilder stories in hushed tones. There's the time she supposedly challenged the most famous prostitute in Rome, Scylla, to an endurance contest with a panel of judges and everything. Think of it as the world's first recorded sex marathon, complete with official scorekeepers. Messalina allegedly won by lasting until dawn without breaks, though Juvenal suggests she would have continued if the brothel hadn't closed for cleaning. The cleaning staff must have had interesting union negotiations. But here's where it gets properly bonkers. Even by Roman standards, you witness her falling genuinely in love with a senator named Gaius Silius, described as the most beautiful man in Rome, which, given Roman beauty standards, probably means he looked like a Marvel character who moisturizes. She doesn't just take him as a lover, she actually marries him, while still married to the emperor, in a public ceremony with witnesses. It's like posting your affair on Instagram while your spouse is tagged in the photos. Historians still argue whether this was supreme stupidity or a desperate coup attempt. Maybe she thought Claudius was so checked out he wouldn't notice. Maybe Silius convinced her they could rule together. Maybe the lead pipes really were making everyone insane. But you're there when the freedman Narcissus, Claudius's secretary, and the actual brains of the operation, breaks the news to the emperor during a dinner party. Claudius supposedly asks, "Am I still emperor?" which is simultaneously the saddest and funniest response possible to finding out your wife has committed bigamy with treasonous intent. The aftermath unfolds with typical Roman efficiency. Messalina flees to the gardens of Lucullus, which she'd acquired by having the previous owner executed, multitasking, where she alternates between writing tearful letters to Claudius and trying to seduce the guards sent to kill her, even facing death. She's working her primary skill set. When it becomes clear the charm offensive isn't working, her mother, Domitia Lepida, tells her to die with dignity. Instead, Messalina hesitates, probably trying to figure out if there's anyone left to sleep with who might save her. The execution squad doesn't wait for her to decide. As you watch the sword fall, you can't help but notice the irony. She dies in gardens stolen through abuse of power, killed for a marriage that was itself an abuse of power, ordered by a husband she'd consistently abused. It's almost poetic if you ignore all the innocent people who died along the way. The Roman gossip mill immediately starts churning out even wilder stories, including one where she regularly drugged Claudius to sneak out for orgies. Honestly, given everything else you've witnessed, the drugging seems like the most reasonable part of her routine. The chaos of Messalina's execution still echoes in your ears as you're whisked eastward to 7th century China, where you encounter a woman who makes the Roman empress look like an amateur. Wu Zetian starts her career in Emperor Taizong's palace as a low-ranking concubine, basically an intern in the imperial bedroom, but you quickly realize she's playing a game of sexual chess while everyone else is playing checkers. When the emperor dies, standard protocol demands all childless concubines become Buddhist nuns. Wu shaves her head, dons the robes, and you think her story ends there. Think again. You watch her catch the eye of the new emperor, Gaozong, during a memorial service for his dead father. Yes, She seduces the son while supposedly mourning the father in a Buddhist temple while technically being a nun. The sheer audacity makes you want to slow clap. She doesn't just seduce him, she composes poetry about their forbidden love, turning sacrilege into high art. Within months, she's back in the palace, promoted from the previous emperor's leftover concubine to the current emperor's favorite. It's the career pivot of the millennium. But here's where Wu's genius truly shines, where Messalina was all appetite and no strategy. Wu uses her sexuality like a Swiss army knife. Every encounter serves multiple purposes. She bears Gaozong's sons, while simultaneously becoming his political advisor, secretary, and eventually co-ruler. The pillow talk in their bedroom reshapes tax policy. Their morning trysts decide military campaigns. She literally restructures the Chinese bureaucracy between orgasms, introducing merit-based exams while the emperor recovers his breath. The mainstream histories, written by horrified Confucian scholars, claim she strangled her own infant daughter to frame the Empress Wang for murder. Modern historians still argue whether this actually happened or if it's character assassination by misogynistic chroniclers who couldn't handle a woman in power. What you can confirm is that Empress Wang and the former favorite consort Xiao end up demoted, imprisoned, and eventually executed in particularly creative ways, supposedly turned into human swine after having their limbs cut off. Wu might not have killed her baby, but she definitely didn't mess around with rival elimination. You notice her sexual strategy evolves with her power. As Gaozong develops health problems, possibly strokes, possibly poisoning, historians still debate. Wu starts taking younger lovers while maintaining the fiction of devoted widowhood. She establishes an entire government department called the Institute of the Crane, staffed entirely by handsome young men with very vague official duties. The Zhang brothers, her most notorious favorites, officially serve as palace decorators, but spend most of their time decorating her bedchamber. She's essentially running a reverse harem funded by tax revenue, and somehow making it seem like statecraft. Here's a detail that would make modern spin doctors weep with envy. She commissions a Buddhist text declaring her the reincarnation of Maitreya Buddha, destined to rule as a female sovereign. She doesn't just sleep her way to power, she creates an entire theological justification for why heaven wants her in charge. Monks across the empire start preaching that her sexual liberation represents divine feminine energy, bringing balance to the cosmic order. It's gaslighting on a civilizational scale. The pearl-clutching chronicles describe her hosting selection ceremonies, where she'd review potential lovers like a general inspecting troops. Young scholars, monks, soldiers, anyone with the right combination of looks, talent, and ambition could apply. One account claims she kept a stable of male courtesans who had to maintain their appearance with special diets and exercises, basically creating the world's first government-sponsored boy band. When Confucian ministers complained about the expense, she'd promote the complainers to distant frontier posts. Nothing says, "Shut up about my sex budget," like reassignment to guard duty on the Mongolian border. You're present for her greatest triumph, declaring herself emperor, not empress, of a new Zhou dynasty at age 66. the only woman in Chinese history to rule in her own right. By this point, she's outlived most of her early lovers, survived countless assassination attempts, and built a secret police network that makes the KGB look understaffed. She celebrates by taking new favorites young enough to be her grandsons and commissioning penis-shaped temples that she claims represent cosmic harmony. The Zhou dynasty might only last for her lifetime, but those architectural choices ensure nobody forgets her reign. Your journey through imperial bedchambers takes an unexpected turn as you land in 6th century Constantinople, where the Byzantine Empire's most unlikely empress is holding court. Theodora started life about as far from a palace as possible. Her father trained bears for the Hippodrome Circus, and after his death, young Theodora and her sisters performed in ways that would make modern Vegas showgirls blush. You're watching her early career, and let's just say when ancient sources describe her act with trained geese, they're not talking about juggling. The future empress works the Constantinople theater circuit, where actress is essentially code for high-end prostitute with a talent for comedy. Procopius, the TMZ of Byzantine historians, claims she'd service 10 men a night, then complain that nature only gave her 3 orifices to work with. Even accounting for ancient slut-shaming, the woman clearly had stamina that would impress marathon runners. But you notice something else between performances. She's studying, while other actresses count their coins. Theodora memorizes legal codes and practices rhetoric. You follow her through a catastrophic career move, becoming the mistress of Hecebolus, governor of Pentapolis in North Africa. He dumps her, penniless and stranded in Alexandria. Most people would crawl back to Constantinople defeated. Theodora? She spends a year with Christian mystics, possibly converting to monophysite Christianity, definitely learning how power actually works. She returns to Constantinople transformed, still beautiful, still charismatic, but now armed with theological arguments and political connections. Here's where fate delivers a plot twist worthy of HBO. Justinian, nephew of the emperor and heir apparent, sees her at a dinner party. He's a workaholic law nerd who probably planned to die a virgin martyr to bureaucracy. She's an ex-prostitute who once publicly simulated Leda and the Swan with live poultry. By all logic, this should end with a scandalous one-night stand. Instead, Justinian falls completely, catastrophically in love. He changes the laws, literally rewrites the Roman legal code so he can marry her. The wedding night must have been educational for Justinian. You imagine Theodora deploying every trick learned in years of professional sex work, probably inventing a few new ones just to keep things interesting. But here's the kicker. She immediately stops sleeping with anyone else. The woman who supposedly complained about not having enough orifices for all her clients becomes mysteriously monogamous. Historians still argue whether this was genuine love, strategic calculation, or simply exhaustion from her previous workload. The mainstream history focuses on her political influence, how she saved Justinian's throne during the Nika riots by refusing to flee, supposedly declaring she'd rather die in purple than live in exile. But you're privy to the bedroom dynamics that made this partnership work. While Justinian drafts his famous law codes, Theodora whispers suggestions about women's rights, Suddenly, Roman law includes revolutionary provisions for divorce, property ownership, and protection of prostitutes. It's like she's encoding her entire life experience into imperial legislation. You discover her secret network of former colleagues, actresses, prostitutes, dancers, who become her eyes and ears throughout the empire. She sets up a convent called Metanoia, repentance, for ex-prostitutes. Though some residents complain about the mandatory career change and occasionally jump off the walls, she's trying to save the other women from her past while using that same past as an intelligence network. Every brothel in Constantinople essentially becomes a Byzantine CIA outpost. Here's a detail that makes you reconsider everything. After her death, Justinian never remarries, never takes another lover, and spends his remaining 17 years essentially governing as half a person. Whatever sexual magic she worked on, that uptight law student lasted literally until death. He builds the Hagia Sophia partly as a monument to their partnership, encoding their initials in the marble. The building that defines Byzantine architecture is basically a massive love letter from a nerd to his reformed sex worker wife. The court gossip about her later years gets even wilder. Some claim she and Justinian hosted theological debates that turned into sophisticated orgies, combining intellectual and physical stimulation in ways that would confuse modern academia. Others suggest she used her sexual expertise to broker diplomatic marriages, essentially providing intimacy coaching to ensure political alliances stayed properly consummated. Imagine the empress who used to perform with geese, now teaching virgin princesses how to keep their arranged husbands interested. The character development alone deserves its own Netflix series. You're still marveling at Theodora's transformation when history catapults you forward to Tudor England, where another unlikely woman is rewriting the rules of royal seduction. Anne Boleyn doesn't start as a prostitute or concubine. She's minor nobility, educated in the French court, speaking multiple languages and playing the lute like a Renaissance rock star. But watching her work Henry VIII, you realize she's playing a game just as dangerous as any of her predecessors, with stakes that will literally split Christianity. The scene opens at court in 1526, where Henry's been married to Catherine of Aragon for 17 years. You watch Anne return from France, probably expecting to make a decent marriage to some earl and spend her life managing estates. Instead, the king, who looks less like Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and more like a ginger linebacker going to seed, decides he's in love. Not unusual. Except Anne does something nobody expects. She says no. Not no, Your Majesty, but absolutely not unless you put a ring on it and make me queen. The audacity makes you gasp. Here's a woman whose sister Mary already served as the king's mistress, discarded with a pat on the head and a husband willing to raise royal bastards. Anne's watched this movie before and decided she wants a different ending. She weaponizes Henry's desire against him, keeping him at arm's length while somehow maintaining his interest for 6 agonizing years. 6 years. In a court where most affairs last about as long as fresh rushes on the floor, you follow their bizarre courtship through love letters that would make modern sexts look tame. Henry, the King of England, actually draws little hearts around their initials like a lovesick teenager. He writes about dreaming of her pretty duckies, her breasts, and wishing himself between your arms. And Anne responds with carefully crafted messages that promise everything while delivering nothing. The textual equivalent of a medieval striptease. She's basically invented edging as a political strategy. The mainstream history books focus on the religious Reformation, Henry's break with Rome to get his divorce, but you're seeing the bedroom politics that drove it. Anne introduces Henry to banned Protestant texts during their intimate moments, discussing theology while letting him get just close enough to drive him insane. She's literally pillow talking him into destroying 1,000 years of Catholic tradition. Every almost kiss comes with a conversation about papal corruption. Every carefully orchestrated embrace includes whispers about English independence. Here's the scandal that shocked Europe. She probably let him do everything except actual intercourse. The court gossips report heavy petting sessions that left the king stumbling out of her chambers, sweating and frustrated. One ambassador writes home that Anne allows him to caress her but not to violate her, which in Tudor speak means she's turned royal blue balls into an art form. She's operating by the technical virgin rules of a modern evangelical teenager, except the fate of nations hangs on her hymen. Historians still argue whether she genuinely loved Henry or just played the longest con in English history. You see moments that suggest both. Her genuine tears when he writes poetry for her, but also her calculated movements when she knows foreign ambassadors are watching. She introduces French fashions that showcase her long neck and small breasts, turning what others might see as flaws into England's new beauty standard. Every lady at court starts wearing French hoods and high necklines, basically cosplaying as Anne while she cosplays as an available virgin. The wedding night in 1533 arrives anticlimactically. She's already pregnant, having finally given in once the crown was secured. The sex that split England from Rome probably lasted about 3 minutes, based on Henry's later complaints about her lack of enthusiasm. But here's what the movies don't show. She immediately starts planning for the next round, studying fertility treatments and consulting midwives about positions most likely to produce sons. She approaches royal baby making like a military campaign, complete with dietary restrictions and scheduled coupling based on lunar cycles. You witness her final tragedy unfold. 3 years, 1 daughter, multiple miscarriages, and Henry's wandering eye landing on Jane Seymour. Anne tries to resurrect the old magic, but you can't play hard to get when you're already gotten. Her execution on trumped-up adultery charges, including with her own brother, because Henry really committed to the smear campaign, serves as history's ultimate warning. When you use sex as a weapon, make sure you don't run out of ammunition. The Tower of London's blood-soaked stones fade as you're transported to 17th century Angola, where Queen Nzinga is redefining what it means to rule with desire. You arrive during her negotiation with Portuguese colonizers, and the first thing you notice is her solution to their power play of not providing her a chair. She orders one of her servants to get on all fours, then sits on his back for the entire meeting. It's a move that says, I'll literally turn a human into furniture before I let you diminish me. And suddenly, every corporate power play you've ever witnessed seems adorably quaint. Nzinga inherited a kingdom under assault, Portuguese slavers, local rivals, everyone wanting a piece of Ndongo, where other rulers might rely on armies alone. She weaponizes her sexuality with strategic precision that would impress military theorists. You watch her maintain what Portuguese priests clutchingly describe as a harem of 50 to 60 men, dressed in women's clothes and referred to as her wives. But this isn't just about pleasure. It's a complete inversion of gender power structures that makes European minds short circuit. The mainstream histories written by scandalized missionaries focus on the cross-dressing, missing the political genius underneath by feminizing her male concubines. She's essentially saying traditional masculinity is so beneath her that men must become women to approach her bed. These aren't just boy toys, they're warriors who fight in her armies, advisors who help plan campaigns, spies who gather intelligence. She's created a system where loyalty is literally measured in how well you can rock a skirt while discussing battle tactics. You follow her daily routine, which makes Catherine the Great look like a nun. Morning military councils, where she reviews troop movements while her current favorite massages her feet. Afternoon diplomatic meetings, where she negotiates with Portuguese envoys while surrounded by half-naked men feeding her fruit. Evening rituals, where she supposedly chooses bedmates through combat. Warriors fighting for the honor of pleasuring their queen. It's like combining The Bachelor with gladiator games. Except the prize is serving a woman who once allegedly ate human flesh to intimidate enemies, probably propaganda, but she definitely didn't deny it. Here's where it gets properly wild. When she conquers new territory, she reportedly seduces enemy leaders before battle, using sex as reconnaissance. Imagine being a rival chief, thinking you're about to have the night of your life with this powerful woman, only to realize mid-thrust that you've just revealed your entire battle plan during pillow talk. Some accounts claim she'd execute lovers immediately after if they disappointed her, though this might be European men projecting their own performance anxiety onto African history. The Portuguese letters home describe their complete bafflement at her system. She's in her 60s, leading armies personally, taking lovers young enough to be her grandsons, and somehow making it all work as statecraft when they try to use her gender against her in negotiations. She responds by increasing her male harem and making visiting diplomats watch her evening selection process. It's psychological warfare through aggressive sexuality. You think I'm weak because I'm a woman? Watch me command dozens of men with a gesture. Historians still argue whether her female-to-male gender performance, she often insisted on being called king rather than queen, was sincere identity or strategic theater. You see her switch between roles fluidly, feminine seductress with Portuguese priests she needs to manipulate, masculine warrior with troops she needs to inspire, something entirely beyond European gender concepts with her own people. She's not just breaking binary rules, she's creating entirely new categories of power. The most subversive part? Her system works. For over 30 years, she keeps Ndongo independent, while other African kingdoms fall to colonization, her warrior lovers form an elite guard more loyal than any traditional army. Her intelligence network, built on pillow talk and post-coital confessions, rivals any European spy system when she finally makes peace with Portugal in her 80s. It's on her terms, with her sovereignty intact. She dies at 90, supposedly still taking lovers, having outlived most European monarchs who called her savage. You realize she's perhaps the only ruler in history who successfully used reverse harem dynamics as an actual governing system rather than just personal pleasure. While Europeans were burning witches for showing ankle, she was running a kingdom where male submission to female desire was institutionalized policy. No wonder the Portuguese priests needed so much communion wine. Your temporal whiplash intensifies as you're yanked back to ancient Rome, circa 50 CE, where Agrippina the Younger makes every other scheming mother in history look like they're running bake sales. You materialize in the imperial palace just as she's marrying her uncle Claudius. Yes, the same Claudius who had Messalina executed for excessive horniness. Apparently, the man had a type, women who would eventually try to kill him. The incest thing shocks you until you remember Roman imperial families treated the genealogy like a circle rather than a tree. But Agrippina's not just committing but casual uncle-cest for fun. She's executing a plan years in the making. You've watched her seduce Claudius gradually, starting with sisterly affection at family dinners, escalating to accidentally brushing against him in corridors, culminating in private conferences where she advises him on imperial matters while wearing increasingly transparent silks. It's grooming, but in reverse, and with genocidal ambitions. You observe her technique, where Messalina was all appetite. Agrippina deploys sexuality like a precision instrument. She studies Claudius's preferences, discovers his weakness for intelligent women who remind him of his grandmother, then reshapes herself into that exact fantasy. She even learns to stutter slightly when aroused, mirroring his speech impediment to create subconscious bonding. Its manipulation so sophisticated it borders on method acting. The wedding night must have been awkward. Imagine consummating with someone who changed your diapers as a baby, but Agrippina powers through with the determination of someone who's already murdered her second husband by poisoning his dinner. She reportedly used special positions recommended by Greek courtesans for older men with mobility issues, proving that even in incest, she's a thoughtful partner, the things women do for power. Here's where her sexual strategy gets truly disturbing. She's grooming her son, Nero, simultaneously, not sexually, probably. Roman sources are unclear, but using the same psychological techniques. You watch her create an emotional dependency so intense that Nero can't function without her approval. She chooses his lovers, instructs them on his preferences, sometimes watches to ensure they're performing correctly. It's helicopter parenting taken to psychosexual extremes. The mainstream histories focus on her political maneuvering, how she got Nero adopted as Claudius's heir over his biological son, Britannicus. But you see the bedroom politics underneath. She times her sexual encounters with Claudius to coincide with important administrative decisions. Every orgasm comes with a suggestion about succession. She literally fucks him into changing his will, using post-coital vulnerability to reshape the empire's future. Modern lobbyists take notes. You witness her installing allies throughout the palace by basically becoming the empire's most powerful madam. She provides lovers to senators, carefully selected for maximum influence. That senator opposing her policies? Suddenly, he's obsessed with a freedwoman who reports every pillow talk back to Agrippina, the general questioning Nero's legitimacy. Now distracted by a Syrian dancer who's actually Agrippina's spy. She's running a honeypot operation that would make a Cold War intelligence agencies weep with envy. Here's a detail that breaks your brain. She probably killed Claudius with poisoned mushrooms, but only after ensuring he'd signed all necessary documents. The assassination timing required her to maintain sexual relations with a man she was actively poisoning, calculating exactly how much toxin would kill him slowly enough to finish imperial business, but quickly enough that he couldn't change his mind. Imagine maintaining arousal while mentally calculating poison dosages. The multitasking alone deserves recognition. Historians still argue whether her relationship with Nero crossed physical boundaries after he became emperor. Suetonius claims Nero's friends had to intervene when they noticed suspicious stains on her clothes after closed-door meetings. But you see a more complex dynamic. She's using emotional incest as a control mechanism, keeping him perpetually infantilized while ruling through him. When he finally has her murdered on a boat designed to collapse, because Romans never did anything simply. It's less matricide and more desperate escape from psychological bondage. The irony hits you as you watch her final moments. She dies asking the assassins to stab her in the womb that bore Nero, turning even her murder into a psychosexual guilt trip. Her last words are basically, "Kill the part of me that created you," which is either poetic justice or the ultimate maternal manipulation, probably both. She exits history, having proved that with enough determination, you can weaponize motherhood itself into an instrument of imperial control. The maternal manipulation of Agrippina still haunts your thoughts as you're transported even further back to ancient Assyria, where you encounter a queen so legendary that historians can't agree if she actually existed or represents multiple women blurred into one super scandal, Semiramis, or Shemuramat in the original Akkadian, supposedly ruled in the 9th century BCE. But her story accumulated sexual mythology like a snowball rolling through a brothel. You find yourself in the hanging gardens of Babylon, which she allegedly built, though Nebuchadnezzar would like a word. Watching this woman who makes Wonder Woman look underachieving, the Greek historian claim she was born from a goddess mating with a mortal, abandoned as a baby, raised by doves, and discovered by a shepherd. It's like someone combined every Disney princess origin story and added gratuitous violence and sex. The real woman was probably just a very effective queen regent. But why let facts ruin a good character assassination? The stories about her sexual appetite reach levels that defy both physics and biology. Diodorus claims she would take soldiers as lovers for one night, then have them executed at dawn to prevent kiss and tell memoirs. You watch the alleged nightly ritual, gorgeous warrior selected from the ranks. brought to her pleasure palace, given the night of his life, then discreetly murdered before breakfast. It's supposedly how she maintained mystery. Dead men tell no tales about royal bedroom preferences. The logistics alone boggle the mind. How many soldiers can you go through before it affects military readiness? Did they have recruitment posters warning about the position's mortality rate? You notice how each historian adds their own flourishes to her legend. The Greeks, bitter about Assyrian power, paint her as insatiably lustful. The Romans, always ready to slut shame powerful women, add bestial elements. She supposedly mated with horses, though that might be a mistranslation of her cavalry innovations. Armenian chronicles claim she fell in love with their king Ara the Beautiful, and when he rejected her advances, she invaded Armenia just to drag him to her bed. When he died in battle, she allegedly tried to resurrect him with magic so she could finally get laid. That's commitment to a booty call. The mainstream version has her building an empire through military genius and administrative innovation, but the sexual mythology reveals more about male anxiety than female power. Every achievement gets a sexual explanation. She conquered Egypt by seducing generals, built cities to commemorate good lovers, designed irrigation systems shaped like genitalia. It's like ancient incels couldn't comprehend female competence without adding porn scenarios. You're watching history's first documented case of she must have slept her way to the top syndrome. Here's what makes you think. Even if 10% of the sexual stories are true, she created a template followed by powerful women for millennia. Use sexuality as a weapon? Check. Eliminate witnesses to maintain mystique? Check. Build architectural wonders that make men feel inadequate? Double check. She allegedly commissioned obelisks specifically designed to remind viewers of her sexual superiority. Basically, ancient dick measuring contests where she always won by default. You witness what might be her greatest power play, the succession strategy, unlike other queens who fought to place their sons on thrones. Semiramis supposedly raised her son Ninus to be weak and effeminate, ensuring she could rule through him indefinitely. She dressed him in women's clothes, kept him secluded in the palace, and took lovers who looked like him to confuse court observers. It's gender-bending gaslighting on a civilization scale. Historians still argue whether this was character assassination or actual policy. But either way, someone thought it was plausible enough to record. The death stories vary wildly. Transformed into a dove by the gods, murdered by her son when he discovered her plotting, ascending to heaven after satisfying 1,000 lovers. Your favorite version has her disappearing into the desert after declaring she'd return when the world needed her most, like some sort of sexual superhero waiting for the slut signal. Modern archaeologists finding ancient dildos in Assyrian ruins wonder if they're ritual objects or just evidence that Semiramis's legend inspired generations of horny antiquity. You realize her true power wasn't in whatever she did or didn't do sexually. It's in how men couldn't tell her story without making it about sex. She ruled for 42 years, built an infrastructure still visible from space, and possibly invented the postal system. But no, let's focus on imaginary horse fucking. It's almost like powerful women threatening patriarchy get retroactively assigned as sexual deviancy to explain their success. Shocking. The mythological haze of Semiramis clears as you land in something more concrete, but equally scandalous. Medieval France, 1407, where Queen Isabeau of Bavaria is turning the Hundred Years' War into the Hundred Years' Orgy. You materialize in the Hotel Barbette just as her husband, King Charles VI, is having another one of his episodes. He thinks he's made of glass and might shatter if anyone touches him, while the king cowers in terror from imaginary impacts. Isabeau's in her chambers with Louis d'Orléans, her brother-in-law, conducting what chroniclers delicately call private negotiations. The affair is so open that Parisian street singers compose dirty ditties about it. You hear merchants humming tunes about the Queen's midnight councils, where state policy gets decided between position changes. But here's what makes Isabeau fascinating. She's not trying to hide anything. In a world where queens get executed for suspected adultery, she's basically running a medieval OnlyFans out of the royal palace. When nobles clutch their pearls, she clutches Louis's. Well, let's just say she has different priorities. You watch her navigate the impossible situation with Charles's madness. He cycles between thinking he's St. George, refusing to bathe for months, and occasionally running naked through palace corridors, attacking servants during lucid periods. He's sweet but useless during mad phases. He's actively dangerous. The mainstream histories judge her for taking lovers, conveniently ignoring that her husband spent 6 months convinced his wife was actually a demon trying to steal his glass body. What's a queen supposed to do? Invest in really good vibrators. It's the 15th century. They barely have decent candles. The sexual politics get more complex when you realize she's essentially running France during Charles's episodes. Every lover serves a political purpose. Louis d'Orléans doesn't just warm her bed, he leads her faction against the Burgundians. When he's assassinated in 1407, literally right after leaving her chambers, still adjusting his clothes, she doesn't waste time mourning. Within weeks, she's cultivating new allies through the same horizontal diplomacy. The court whispers about her insatiable appetite, missing that she's conducting statecraft through strategic fornication. Here's a detail that would traumatize modern family therapists. She allegedly arranges for her own daughter-in-law's deflowering to ensure the bloodline continues while her son is off fighting. When young Charles VII proves too shy to consummate with Marie of Anjou, Isabeau supposedly provides instruction, encouragement, and possibly visual aids. Some accounts suggest she demonstrated techniques personally, though that might be propaganda from her enemies. Still, imagine your mother-in-law giving you sex coaching. The therapy bills would be astronomical. You follow the notorious Tour de Nestlé affair, where Isabeau allegedly hosts orgies in a tower overlooking the Seine. The stories claim she'd have lovers thrown from the windows when she tired of them, their bodies feeding the fish below. Historians still argue whether this actually happened or if it's recycled from earlier scandals. But you see nobles disappearing after visiting her chambers, and the fish in that part of the Seine do seem remarkably well fed. Maybe she just had really intense breakup methods. The documentation of her expenses provides comedy gold, Royal accountants dutifully record payments for medicines to restore the queen's vigor, medieval Viagra, special cushions for the queen's comfort, sex furniture, and repairs to the queen's chambers. Apparently, the action got rough. One entry lists compensation for a carpenter who fixed her bed 7 times in 1 month. Either she had termites or was hosting the world's most athletic book club. Historians still argue whether she committed the ultimate betrayal, signing the Treaty of Troyes that disinherited her own son and gave France to England. You watch her negotiate with the English while her latest lover, a young knight who could be her grandson, massages her feet. She trades away her children's birthright for personal security and continued access to boy toys. It's either the worst mothering in history or a pragmatic recognition that France is fucked anyway, so she might as well ensure her own comfortable retirement. The mainstream narrative paints her as a traitor who sold out France for personal pleasure, but watching her operate, you see a woman using the only tools available to maintain power in an impossible situation. When your husband thinks he's made of glass, your kingdom is torn by civil war, and everyone wants to control you. Strategic sluttiness might be the smartest option available. At least she got regular orgasms while the country burned. The French palace intrigue fades as you're plunged into 6th century Merovingian Gaul, where Fredegonde makes Isabeau look like a Disney princess. You arrive just as she's transitioning from servant girl to royal mistress, catching King Chilperic Wise Eye while serving wine at a feast. But unlike Cinderella, her fairy godmother is apparently Satan, and the glass slipper is filled with poison for anyone who gets in her way. You watch her seduce Chilperic with calculated precision. She doesn't just offer her body, she whispers about his wife, Audovera's supposed plots, plants evidence of adultery, suggests that those stomach cramps might be assassination attempts within months. Audovera's in a convent, and Fredegonde's warming the royal bed. When Chilperic marries Galswintha for her massive dowry, Fredegonde doesn't panic. She waits. 3 days after the wedding, Galswintha's found strangled in her bed. Chilperic mourns for exactly the time it takes Fredegonde to undress, then marries his mistress while the previous queen's body is still warm. The mainstream histories written by horrified bishops focus on her low birth and murderous tendencies, but you're seeing something more complex, a woman using sexuality to rewrite social hierarchies. She doesn't just fuck her way to power, she creates a new system where being good in bed matters more than bloodlines. The Frankish nobles who sneer at the servant queen find themselves replaced by her lovers, promoted based on their ability to satisfy her increasingly creative demands. You follow her through pregnancies that she weaponizes like biological warfare while carrying Chilperic's children. She seduces his rivals, claims the babies could be theirs, creates succession crises that she alone can navigate. One chronicler reports she kept multiple nobles convinced they'd fathered the same prince, using confusion over paternity to ensure loyalty. It's Maury Povich meets Game of Thrones. With more murder, here's where it gets properly unhinged. When Chilperic's adult sons from his first marriage oppose her, she doesn't just have them killed, she seduces them first. Merovec falls so hard, he marries his stepmother's rival, Brunhilde, just to make Fredegund jealous. Clovis gets framed for treason after Fredegund claims he tried to assault her, showing the court bite marks that she probably paid someone to inflict. She's turned false rape accusations into statecraft 5 centuries before Have Me Too. The assassinations become her signature move. You watch her recruit killers through sexual favors, creating a network of murderers literally bound to her by orgasms. She sends 2 clerics to kill King Sigebert by seducing them, training them in knife work between sexual sessions, blessing their weapons with fluids that definitely aren't holy water. When they succeed but get caught, she publicly denies knowledge while privately ensuring their families receive mysterious windfalls. It's a targeted killing program funded by royal hookups. Historians still argue about the physician incident. When young Prince Samson falls ill, Fredegund brings in a Jewish doctor. The child dies, and she immediately accuses the doctor of poisoning, but not before reportedly extracting medical knowledge through what chronicles call intimate persuasion. Did she fuck him for poison recipes? Seduce him to learn which herbs cause untraceable deaths? The accounts are vague, but subsequent mysterious illnesses among her enemies suggest she learned something useful during those medical consultations. You witness her greatest power play after Chilperic's assassination in 584. Instead of mourning, she immediately seduces his brother Guntram, convincing him she's carrying Chilperic's posthumous heir, despite being suspiciously unpregnant until after the murder. She uses tears, strategic fainting, and probably some advanced bedroom techniques to secure his protection. The grief-stricken widow act lasts exactly as long as needed to consolidate power. Then she's back to recruiting assassins through Tinder-style selection processes. The sexual violence she orchestrates reaches creative peaks. Bishop Praetextatus, who dared criticize her, gets stabbed during Easter Mass by a killer she'd spent weeks training in both murder and pleasure. She visits him on his deathbed, pretending concern while he bleeds out, probably getting off on the power play. When he accuses her with his dying breath, she performs outrage so convincing that witnesses doubt the saint over the sinner. Her death in 597 comes peacefully, unusual for someone who lived so violently. You realize she's achieved something remarkable, rising from servant to de facto ruler through strategic murder and selective fucking, maintaining power for over 2 decades in an era when most queens lasted about as long as fresh milk. She dies in bed, her own, for once, having outlived enemies, rivals, and multiple husbands, proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to die when everyone wants you dead. Fredegund's bloody legacy still lingers as you're transported to the sun-scorched sands of 3rd century Syria, where Queen Zenobia of Palmyra is building an empire with a combination of military genius and strategic seduction that would make Cleopatra take notes. You arrive as she's claiming power after her husband Odenathus's suspiciously convenient assassination, officially killed by a nephew. But the timing right after Zenobia discovered his plans to legitimize sons from another woman raises eyebrows higher than her elaborately styled Syrian crown. You watch her transform Palmyra from a wealthy trading post into the center of a rebellion that makes Rome nervous. But here's what the dusty academic histories miss. She doesn't just conquer through military might. Every captured Roman general gets a choice, death or her bed. Most choose her bed, then mysteriously convert to her cause with the enthusiasm of the truly digmatized. She's basically running a sexual recruitment program where the benefits package includes both literal packages and not getting crucified in the desert. The Roman sources describe her as more beautiful than Cleopatra, but with the strength of an Amazon, which in ancient terms means she was probably moderately attractive, but could bench press a legionnaire. You see her daily routine, morning military drills, where she spars with soldiers while wearing armor designed to emphasize both her warrior prowess and her curves. It's functional and sexy, like if Xena Warrior Princess had a better costume budget and actual political power. Here's where Zenobia's genius shines. She creates a reverse harem of intellectual boy toys. While other queens collected pretty faces, she surrounds herself with hot philosophers. Cassius Longinus, her court advisor, is described as having buttocks like marble and the ability to quote Plato during orgasm. She hosts symposiums that start with theological debates and end with the kind of activities that would make Socrates blush. It's Athens meets Pornhub. With better production values, you witness her seduction of Zabdas, her top general, which historians still argue about. Did she actually love this weather-beaten warrior, or was ensuring his loyalty worth developing a taste for men who smell like camel? The answer becomes clear when you see them plan military campaigns during pillow talk, her fingers tracing battle formations on his scarred chest. She's turned foreplay into tactical planning when he conquers Egypt in her name. It's basically the ancient equivalent of dedicating your mixtape to your girl, except with more decapitations. The mainstream story focuses on her intellectual achievements, how she spoke 5 languages, patronized scholars, and claimed descent from Cleopatra, but you're seeing the bedroom politics underneath. When Roman ambassadors arrive demanding submission, she receives them in a throne room decorated with erotic murals depicting her various conquests, both territorial and sexual. The message is clear. I've fucked your generals and your borders. Want to be next? Historians still debate the Persian prince incident, when a Sassanid noble arrives proposing alliance through marriage. Zenobia supposedly agrees to a night of passion to seal negotiations. By morning, he's agreed to terms so favorable to Palmyra that his own court assumes she drugged him. But you see what really happened. She introduced him to Syrian techniques unknown in austere Persia, leaving him so sexually shattered he'd sign anything for a repeat performance. She literally fucked him into submission. The Roman Emperor Aurelian finally marches against her. And here's where the stories get really wild. Some accounts claim she tried to seduce him through letters, promising nights that would make Venus herself jealous. And others say she met him in battle, wearing armor so form-fitting it distracted his soldiers. When finally captured after a desert chase, she supposedly offered herself to Aurelian in exchange for Palmyra's freedom. He declined, possibly the only man in history to turn down Zenobia, which explains why Romans called him the restorer of the world, but never the smart one. You watch her trial in Rome, where she appears in golden chains, somehow making imprisonment look like a fashion statement instead of execution. Aurelian grants her a villa in Tivoli, where she lives out her days, hosting dinner parties that become legendary for their combination of intellectual discourse and barely concealed orgies. Roman matrons publicly condemn her while privately begging for invitations. She dies peacefully, having transformed from desert rebel to the ancient world's most exclusive madam, proving that sometimes losing an empire is just a career pivot. The Syrian sun fades as you're pulled back to ancient Macedonia, where Olympias, mother of Alexander the Great, is redefining the phrase helicopter parent with a sexual twist that would make even Freud need therapy. You materialize in the palace at Pella around 357 BCE, where this Epirote princess has just married Philip II and is already plotting to make her bedroom the center of Macedonian power. You watch her wedding night, where she reportedly terrified Philip, a man who'd conquered most of Greece, by performing religious rites mid-coitus. She claims to be channeling Dionysian mysteries, moaning prophecies, while writhing in ways that blur the line between orgasm and oracle. Philip, expecting a standard royal mounting, instead gets what amounts to supernatural phone sex with various deities. No wonder their marriage was rocky from the start. The conception of Alexander becomes mythology before the kid's even born. Olympia spreads stories that Zeus himself visited her bed in the form of a lightning bolt, which is certainly more flattering than admitting Philip was probably drunk and lasted 30 seconds. She cultivates this divine pregnancy narrative with the dedication of a modern influencer crafting their brand. You see her staging visions where she writhes in religious ecstasy, conveniently timed for when foreign ambassadors are visiting. It's performance art meets political propaganda meets public masturbation. Here's where it gets properly weird. She keeps snakes in her bed, not metaphorical trouser snakes, actual serpents that she claims are sacred to Dionysus. Imagine being Philip, trying to get intimate with your wife while pythons slither between the sheets. Some historians think the snakes were defanged pets. Others suggest they were a primitive form of birth control. Nothing kills the mood like reptilian spectators. You watch servants discreetly removing snake droppings from royal linens, while Olympias insists it's divine fertilizer. The mainstream histories focus on her political machinations, but you're seeing how she weaponizes mystical sexuality. When Philip takes another wife, a younger Macedonian named Cleopatra Eurydice, Olympias doesn't just plot murder like a normal scorned queen. She performs public rituals claiming the gods have cursed Philip's penis for betraying their sacred union. Suddenly, every time Philip fails to perform, which happens more as he ages and drinks, the court whispers about divine punishment. She's basically invented erectile dysfunction, shaming as a political weapon. You witness her grooming Alexander with deeply uncomfortable mother-son dynamics. She fills his childhood with stories of his divine conception, telling him mortal men are beneath him while simultaneously surrounding him with her male companions who definitely aren't there just for religious instruction. When teenage Alexander shows an interest in women, Olympias provides courtesans who report every detail back to her, It's helicopter parenting meets psychosexual manipulation meets intelligence gathering. The world's greatest conqueror starts life as history's most surveilled virgin. Historians still argue about the Pausanias incident, when Philip's bodyguard assassinates him at his daughter's wedding. Olympias not only shows zero surprise, but immediately has the assassin's body crowned and displayed honorably. The mainstream version says she orchestrated the murder for political reasons, but you see the sexual politics underneath. Pausanias had been Philip's lover before being discarded and gang raped by Philip's new favorites. Olympias didn't just weaponize a jilted lover, she turned sexual trauma into regicide. It's at Me Too with murderous intent. After Philip's death, she goes full mask off. You watch her force Philip's young widow, Cleopatra, to watch her infant son being roasted alive, then hands her a rope for suicide. But here's the twisted part. She supposedly offers to spare them if Cleopatra admits to adultery, retroactively making Philip a cuckold. When Cleopatra refuses to die branded a whore, Olympias has her strangled anyway. It's a sexual humiliation as execution method, proving that slut-shaming can literally be weaponized. Her final years showcase peak delusion, while Alexander conquers the known world. She rules Macedonia, claiming direct communication with him through divine visions that definitely aren't just wine-induced fantasies. She takes lovers young enough to be Alexander's brothers, insisting they're vessels for Zeus to experience mortal pleasure. When one partner questions this theology mid-thrust, she has him executed for blasphemy. Imagine being killed for breaking character during role play. You witness her gruesome end in 316 BCE, stoned to death by relatives of her victims, denied proper burial, but even in death, she spins mythology. Her last words reportedly curse her killer's bloodlines to sexual dysfunction for 7 generations, whether through psychological suggestion or coincidence. Several of her executioners' families do report fertility issues. She dies having turned motherhood, religion, and sexuality into weapons of mass destruction, proving that sometimes the most dangerous woman is the one who believes her own hype. The mystical madness of Olympias dissolves as you're transported to the more calculating depravity of ancient Rome, where Livia Drusilla is perfecting the art of murder through matrimony. You arrive in 38 BCE as she's meeting Octavian, the future Augustus, while 6 months pregnant with her current husband's child. Most women would see pregnancy as a dating impediment. Livia sees it as proof of fertility while maintaining temporary unfuckability, the perfect combination for long-term planning. You watch their courtship, which breaks every Roman social rule, except the ones about consent, and even those get blurry. She's married, pregnant, and technically his enemy's former ally. He's engaged, supposedly mourning his previous wife, and fighting a civil war, yet within days they're sneaking off for strategic conferences that leave both parties suspiciously disheveled. Her husband, Tiberius Claudius Nero, agrees to divorce faster than a modern Vegas annulment, probably because Octavian's definition of please includes having several legions. The wedding happens 3 days after she gives birth, which even by Roman standards is unseemly haste. You're at the ceremony where her ex-husband gives her away, like the world's most awkward father figure, holding the baby she just delivered while she marries another man. The wedding night must have been interesting. Nothing says romance like postpartum bleeding and stitches, but Livia powers through with the determination of someone who's calculated that tolerating Octavian's middling sexual performance is worth ruling the known world. Here's where Livia's genius emerges. She creates the image of the perfect Roman matron while allegedly running the ancient world's most sophisticated assassination program. You see her perfect the poisoned fig, the deadly mushroom, the contaminated wine, always delivered through intermediaries, always looking like natural causes. The mainstream histories call her the grandmother of Rome, but the death toll suggests godmother in the Corleone sense would be more accurate. The sexual politics get intricate when you realize she uses her bedroom access to Augustus for intelligence gathering other Romans would kill for, and frequently do, while he's recovering from their carefully scheduled twice-weekly encounters. She supposedly calculated his optimal performance schedule based on lunar cycles and Senate meetings. She's reading his private correspondence, editing his speeches, and occasionally adding names to his prescription lists. It's pillow talk as executive administration. You witness her most brilliant manipulation, the systematic elimination of Augustus's heirs while maintaining his complete trust. Every time someone stands between her son Tiberius and succession, they develop mysterious illnesses. Marcellus, dead at 20 from fever. Agrippa, gone from sudden illness. Gaius and Lucius, both dead from infections within 18 months. Meanwhile, Livia's there to comfort Augustus, providing sexual solace while coincidentally mentioning how reliable Tiberius has been lately. Historians still argue about the virgin sacrifice rumors. Some sources claim she'd test new poisons on young slaves procured specifically for their beauty and innocence, seducing them first to ensure the toxins worked through various bodily fluids. It sounds like ancient urban legend until you notice the peculiar pattern of attractive young servants dying in her household, always after being promoted to personal attendant. Either she had terrible luck with staff retention or was running history's most lethal internship program. The bedroom dynamics with Augustus become fascinating as they age. By their 50s, sex is probably more theoretical than practical, but she maintains the intimate access through what Romans delicately called alternative satisfactions. She becomes expert at what modern therapists would recognize as sexual caregiving, maintaining his ego while his body fails, ensuring he feels virile even when evidence suggests otherwise. It's manipulation disguised as marital devotion, and it works for over 50 years. You watch her final triumph and tragedy unfold simultaneously. Augustus dies in 14 CE, supposedly in her arms, possibly from her poison. She's achieved everything. Her son Tiberius becomes emperor. She's deified as Augusta. History remembers her as the perfect wife, but Tiberius immediately abandons her, fleeing to Capri for orgies while leaving his mother to die alone. The woman who spent decades manipulating men through calculated intimacy ends up discarded by the son she murdered for. Her death at 87 comes as an anticlimax. No dramatic poisoning, no assassination, just an old woman fading away while her son refuses to visit. But here's the kicker: she outlived almost everyone who might have testified against her, every lover who might have noticed strange tastes in the wine, every servant who saw too much, every rival who got too close, all conveniently dead from natural causes. She dies peacefully in her bed, having proved that patient sociopathy beats passionate violence every time. Livia's calculated coldness evaporates as you make your final stop in 16th century to Scotland, where Margaret Douglas is proving that even imprisonment can't stop a determined woman from weaponizing her sexuality. You materialize in the Tower of London in 1536, where she's locked up for secretly marrying Lord Thomas Howard without Henry VIII's permission, while most prisoners spend their time praying or plotting escape. Margaret's writing love poetry so explicit it makes the guards blush when they confiscate it. You read over her shoulder as she composes verses that would scandalize romance novel publishers. She describes Thomas's tower and her fortress in architectural metaphors that fool nobody, rhyming about how his siege engine breaches her walls nightly in her dreams. This is a woman who's turned prison horniness into high art. When Henry VIII reads these intercepted poems, he reportedly turns purple, not from prudishness, but from jealousy that his niece writes better erotica than his court poets. The Tower becomes her finishing school for sexual politics. You watch her seduce guards into smuggling letters, not through physical contact, the walls are too thick, but through written promises that make medieval sexting look tame. She creates a network of sympathizers by describing, in vivid detail, what rewards await those who help reunite her with Thomas. One guard reportedly fainted after reading her description of gratitude she'd show. She's basically running OnlyFans through prison correspondence. Here's where it gets properly wild. After Thomas dies in the Tower, officially from fever, but the timing after trying to escape is suspicious, Margaret doesn't waste time mourning. Within months, she's cultivating Matthew Stewart, Earl of Lennox, through letters that transition seamlessly from grief to seduction. She writes about how sorrow has inflamed her humors, and only a strong Scottish lord can quench her burning need for consolation, its bereavement as aphrodisiac. And Matthew falls for it completely. The mainstream histories focus on her political maneuvering, how she positions her son to marry Mary, Queen of Scots. But you see the bedroom dynamics that make it possible. She trains her son, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, in the arts of seduction with the creepy thoroughness of a pageant mom. She literally writes him instruction manuals on how to please Mary, including diagrams that historians primly describe as anatomical illustrations for educational purposes. Imagine getting sex ed from your mother, complete with position recommendations based on astrological charts. You witness her masterstroke when Darnley successfully seduces Mary. The Scottish Queen, desperate for an heir and tired of cold Scottish lords, falls for this pretty boy who performs bedroom techniques suspiciously advanced for his age. Margaret's letters during this period read like a coach reviewing game tape, critiquing his performance, suggesting improvements, reminding him that conception requires specific timing and positions. It's Helicopter parenting meets sex therapy meets treason. The scandal explodes when Darnley proves too stupid to live. Literally, he alienates Mary, contracts syphilis from prostitutes, and gets himself murdered in an explosion that definitely wasn't Mary's doing. Wink. Margaret's response? She immediately starts working on Plan B, writing to every eligible noble in Scotland about her need for comfort in her tragic loss. At age 51, she's still using widowhood as a sexual marketing opportunity. Historians still argue about the cipher letters discovered after her death. Written in code, they allegedly detail sexual blackmail schemes involving half the English court. The decoded portions describe noble affairs in pornographic detail, suggesting Margaret ran an intelligence network based on who was fucking whom. One letter supposedly contains a detailed diagram of birthmarks on Lord Leicester's inner thigh, information that could only come from very personal reconnaissance. You watch her final years at Hackney, where she hosts salons that combine poetry readings with what witnesses describe as Italian practices. These gatherings become legendary for introducing continental sexual innovations to uptight English nobles. She dies in 1578, supposedly while dictating a letter describing the inadequacies of English lovers compared to Scots. The secretary reportedly burned the letter, claiming it was too inflammatory for Christian eyes. Her true legacy hits you as you prepare to leave. She proved that sexuality remains powerful even when everything else is stripped away, imprisoned, widowed, politically marginalized. She still managed to shape royal succession through strategic deployment of desire. Every queen you've met wielded sex as a weapon, but Margaret turned it into correspondence course, teaching future generations that power isn't just about who you bed, but how well you document it for posterity. As the last echoes of Margaret's scandalous poetry fade into the gentle darkness of approaching sleep, you find yourself drifting back through all the palace bedchambers and royal boudoirs you visited tonight. The silk sheets of ancient Alexandria blend with the furs of Palmyra. The marble coldness of Rome softens into the warm tapestries of medieval castles. Each queen's story becomes a thread in the vast tapestry of history, woven together by desire, ambition, and the eternal dance between power and passion. Your breathing slows as you realize these women, separated by centuries and continents, shared something profound. They understood that in a world designed to constrain them, sexuality could become liberation, weapon, and artwork all at once. Their stories, embellished by time and telling, remind us that human nature remains remarkably consistent across the ages. We still hunger, still scheme, still confuse love with power and power with love. The palace corridors grow quieter now, the sounds of ancient festivities fading to whispers, then to silence. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the gentle lapping of the Nile against Cleopatra's barge, the soft hiss of Olympias's sacred serpents settling for the night, the scratch of Margaret's quill finally coming to rest. History itself seems to exhale, releasing all its secrets and scandals into the forgiving darkness. Let your mind wander through these tales as sleep approaches, knowing that tomorrow's daylight will find you safely returned to a world where queens make headlines for their fashion choices rather than their body counts. But perhaps, in dreams, you'll walk again through those torch-lit halls where power wore perfume and politics played out on silk pillows. Rest easy, dear listener, and remember, even the most scandalous stories eventually fade into peaceful slumber.